I used to love startups. I did 8 of them. The data says, while you think you're a visionary, there's enough data across the world now to say you're not a visionary, you're hallucinating. And the smarter you are, the deeper the hole you tend to dig. One of the things I learned painfully is that as smart as you are, there is no way you're smarter than the collective intelligence of your potential customers. And they don't exist inside your building. So therefore, there are no facts inside your building, so get the heck outside. What we now know is that no business plan survives first contact with customers. What we propose is you take your hypotheses, you actually break down your vision, and now get it out of the building in a fairly formal way, using something we call the customer development process, to test every one of those hypotheses. And by test them, I don't just mean, here's a product, you want to buy it. That's selling. I mean getting out and understanding deeply what are the customer problems, what are their needs, and what kind of solution might actually solve them. And so not only do you talk to those customers, you build something called minimum viable products. Is using agile engineering to, instead of speccing an entire solution, and then building it and shipping it and finding out people don't want it, you build the product incrementally and iteratively, and you continually interact with those customers trying to understand whether you're on the right track. Your job is to turn those hypotheses into facts. And there are no facts inside your building. So your job is to get outside and test them personally in a physical channel by talking to hundreds of customers, in a web and mobile channel by talking to thousands virtually and some portion physically. You need to watch people's pupils dilate when they actually see and like your product. Getting feedback from customers is the most valuable thing you will do as entrepreneurs. And by the way, customers never behave as you expect. Never. And so the next thing I find is they were like taking their demo and saying, so what do you think? Do you want to buy it? And that's not really customer discovery. That's actually called sales. What's really interesting is customer discovery is not sales. Customer discovery is a lot of listening, not a lot of talking. But the first question, if you're a young entrepreneur, is, I don't know anybody. How can I figure out who to talk to? I can't believe that nowadays with LinkedIn, Facebook, Jigsaw, latest social network of the week, you cannot find 100 people to have a conversation with. And when you start having a conversation with one, the things I train people to do is you ask, whatever else you're asking, you ask 2 final questions. Who else should I be talking to? And because you're a pushy entrepreneur, when they give you those names, or if they do, you say, do you mind if I sit here as you email them introducing me? And then the second thing that I always suggest you ask end the customer discovery interview with is, what should I have really asked you? And sometimes that gets into another half hour of, oh, too bad you're not doing X or Y, because that's really my problem, but I answered your discovery questions, but here's what we're really worried about. So the customer discovery is actually quite easy once you realize you don't need to get the world's best first interview. In fact, it's the sum of these data points over time. It's not just you're going to be doing one and you want to call on the highest level of the organization. In fact, you actually never want to call on the highest level of the organization because you're not selling yet. You don't know enough. You want to, in fact, understand enough about the customer, their problem, how they're solving it today, and whether your solution even is in the planet of what they're thinking. But you need to be aggressive. Sitting around and saying, I couldn't get any meetings this week means you're not really serious about being an entrepreneur. What is it you're actually doing outside the building? And what I think about is you're really testing on the highest possible level your understanding of the customer's problem or need. You implicitly had a hypothesis I want to extract from implicit to have you make explicit. Here's what the pain and the gain we're actually doing for these hypothetical customer segments that I've written down. So literally we're going to get out of the building, take our hypotheses. What we're looking for is not just data, is insights. We find those new insights. We thought the customers were these kinds of people. Holy cow, they're actually these kinds of people. And we thought the features we need, well, they're kind of different. They're actually these features. So what you're doing outside the building is you start with these hypotheses. In this case, let's just take an example. The customers will be male, 24 to 35, live in urban areas. And then we're going to design some experiments and take a look and analyze the data. But it's not just the data. We're trying to understand, did the results match the hypotheses? And if not, just don't give up and say, well, it didn't. Let's try another segment. Understand why your initial hypotheses were wrong, because it's this why not that might give you some insight. The other interesting thing about the customer development process ties back into agile engineering and agile development hand in glove. Basically, it's this notion of the minimum viable product. You're trying to figure out, now that I kind of understand my product and service and that what I'm gaining for customers, what pain I'm solving, what's the smallest possible feature set I could be shipping on day one that solves these pains and creates gains for them? It's not something you're building in isolation. And this really is an interactive process, because there's no way, no possible way, sitting in your office you could figure this out. And the default for great engineers and great entrepreneurs is, oh, I understand customers' problems and needs, so, don't worry about it. We'll just spec the entire product on day one. Your real goal here is to figure out what's the smallest thing you could build and develop that actually get you users or sales or whatever, and get out to market as quickly as possible. So the goal of you getting out of the building, understanding gains and pains, is so you can figure out what's the MVP, or minimum viable product. Back in the old days, what we used to do is specify the entire feature set of the product from beginning to end. Now, this makes sense when you're in a large company releasing version 2.0, 3.0, and 4.0, because you kind of have a feeling of who the customers are and what they need. So a product manager can be pretty accurate about, I've been interacting with customers for the last year and a half, and I think I know what they need. But in a startup, you're really kind of guessing. And the odds are you're going to be guessing wrong. So rather than waste a whole ton of time and money, why don't we actually get outside the building before we build something and waste a lot of engineering time and, more importantly, cash, because that's what puts startups out of business, is running out of money. We want to make sure that we actually listen to the people who eventually will buy this product. We want to make sure we satisfy their wants and needs. So why don't we just figure out how to build the minimum viable product? Build the minimum features in order to get feedback. Now, feedback could take the form of input and verbally, or they gave you early orders, or they gave you anything that was valuable in helping you come to closure of what should we be building in what order. And by the way, an MVP could be something as simple on the web as a wireframe or a PowerPoint slide. As you get more feedback, you could start adding more features. So one caveat is, a comment I always get is, well, Steve Jobs didn't build the iPhone by asking customers, and we really doubt Henry Ford asked customers did they want a car before one existed. In fact, in his case, if you would have asked people about what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse or one with 6 legs. And so the immediate response is, well, therefore, for new products, you just don't get out of the building at all, and that's just a fallacy. There is a type of startup in what we call a new market. What happens when you're doing something completely disruptive that's never existed before is, if Henry Ford used to ask people what they want, they would have said a horse with 6 legs. It turns out that, the answer is not don't talk to people and just come up with an idea. The answer is customer discovery needs to take on a different form. You need to understand the day in the life of a customer. So let's go back to Henry Ford, who was the first mass market automobile manufacturer. Instead of asking people, do they want a car? He would have asked how far do you travel? What would life be if you could travel 10 times further in half the time? All of a sudden, if he would have understood the day in the life of a potential customer before a car and what the life would have been after the car, you actually could have done customer discovery for a new market without having people tell you, I want a horse with 6 legs. They would have described the problem. And so in a new market, you truly need to get up and understand not about product features, because no one will know what you're talking about, but about their day in the life, about the problem that they have today, whether they know they have a problem or not. Does that make sense? So the customer discovery questions you ask are very different, but still valid. Just understand that in new markets, of course, you don't get out and ask people what features they need, but you do want to understand, how is their day in the life different today versus the day after you give them your new product? How does their world change? And there's no possible way, sitting locked in your conference room or your office, you would know that without talking to customers. Let's take a look at the first step in customer discovery. You're going to be living this for the next couple of weeks if you're doing this for real. Phase one is you state your hypotheses, but the next step is you get out of the building. You're going to test the problem. You're going to test your understanding of the customer's problem or need, and you're going to figure out how to build the prototype. The next thing is you're going to test the solution. You're going to test the solution if you're on the web by building a low fidelity and then a high fidelity prototype. And you're going to again test your understanding of the customer's needs and whether your solution matches it. And this match, again, is called product market fit. That's the holy grail for entrepreneurs. Am I building something that people can't get enough of or are just willing to open up their wallets and empty it in front of you to get their hands on? And the fourth phase in customer discovery is you verify or pivot. Do people agree that you're solving a high-value problem or need? And do you understand your business model enough to start test selling, which is the next step in customer validation? Now, what's really depressing to most entrepreneurs is the answer most often the first time you go through this is heck no. And what's worse is, well, they kind of sort of like, well, kind of sort of is not a startup. Kind of sort of is people have been nice to you. The only time you know that you have something that's worth investing your time and money in is if people are literally trying to force their money on you or can't use your product even in its buggy, uninitialized form. Enough. This is what you're looking for. And if you haven't found it yet, that's why the customer development process is an iterative circle. It assumes you will be going through this multiple times. Let's take a look at customer discovery one more time in just a different way. State your hypothesis, test the problem, test the solution, pivot and proceed. And remember, all of this is going on outside the building in front of customers. So problem first, then test the solution. Before you ever do a product demo in customer development and customer discovery, you need to validate that you understand the customer problem.
Bhavik, thanks for your time. I just wanted to tell you about a new commercial real estate app that we're building that's going to help you get more customers, and we wanted to see what you thought.
Okay.
So to start off, let me tell you more about our company and our team, and I think that after I show you our PowerPoint deck, everything will be crystal clear.
Okay.
Let's take a look.
20 minutes later.
So, what do you think? Will you buy it?
No, I'm not really interested. Thank you.
Bhavik, thanks for your time. I wanted to show you our new commercial real estate app that I think is going to help you get a lot more customers and see what you think.
Okay.
So if you look here.
20 minutes later.
So, what do you think? Will you buy it?
No, I'm not really interested. Thank you.
So what Kevin did is what all great entrepreneurs do at first, is that they're so passionate about their product, they believe they understand the customer problem and implicitly understand every possible feature the customers want, and therefore think all they need to do is show the slide deck or the app or the prototype and people will just empty their wallets out in front of them. It turns out that's a mistake, a big mistake, because when Kevin spoke to Bhavik, he was making a set of assumptions that were just simply wrong. Those assumptions, those hypotheses, are nothing more than guesses. And instead of trying to sell your app or show your pitch, what you really need to be doing is listening and asking questions about whether your assumptions are matched by what the customers believe. Let's see the right way to go do this.
Bhavik, thanks for your time. I'm Kevin from realestatepro.com, and we're trying to solve a problem that we think that all real estate brokers may have. Today, what I'd like to do is talk to you about what your job is, how you go about it on a day-to-day basis, and what your routines are.
Okay, is it going to take long?
Oh, no. I'll take up just 20 minutes of your time. So I understand from our mutual friend Phil that you sell commercial real estate?
That's right.
And so do you work for a larger firm or just by yourself?
It's actually a large firm. We are all over the country, and I'm based in this office here in the Bay Area.
So 3 minutes later.
And so do most brokers work that way?
At least all of my peers, we all work the same way. We have the same management style and the same accounts.
So 2 minutes later.
And how's your company organized?
It's organized by divisions and regions, and we are in this region here in California. And we all
So
have
3.5
accounts.
minutes later,
So, who are your customers? How do you go about finding them? How do you maintain relationships with them? And what problems do you have maintaining those?
so in these first interviews, what Kevin is really trying to do is trying to understand three things. First, he's trying to understand, how does the customer even do their job today? Assuming Kevin's not a domain expert, that's kind of the first step in trying to understand the customer. The second thing he's trying to understand is the customer archetype. That is, in a business, you really don't have 25 different types of customers. They kind of fall into buckets. There's usually more than one archetype, but there's usually less than 3 or 4 in an early stage venture. And the third thing you're trying to figure out is whether your assumption about the problem and the value of the problem is actually shared by the customer. Now understand, what we just talked about is all about the problem and customer at first. It's not about showing your product or talking about slides or pitching your presentation or anything yet. And I just want to give you the good word that it's okay. Because as a great entrepreneur, you're going to be dying to demo either PowerPoint or wireframe or do something about your product. And all I could say is resist the urge to talk and spend your time asking questions and listening.
Bhavik, thanks for your time. I'm Kevin from realestatepro.com, and I'm out to solve a problem that I think all real estate brokers have. What I'd like to do today is ask you some questions to see if I understand the problems that you have.
Happy to help.
Fantastic. And if I do so, I have a working prototype that I'd like to potentially show you and get your feedback on.
Oh, really? Wow. Okay.
So, to start off, what are the biggest 3 problems that you deal with in your business?
Getting a qualified lead of customers, making sure there are enough customers, and then following up with these customers.
So, this is so important. How do you solve it today?
I depend a lot on Excel, on email, on my peers. We use some analytics that are being put together by my assistant. It's just a lot of different pieces that we just kludge together.
So, let me make sure I understand this. Finding qualified customers is your biggest pain point, and currently you're doing it using Excel spreadsheets and pacing and colluging an ad hoc system together.
Yeah.
So asking the customer to confirm that Kevin really does understand the problem now gives Kevin permission to go on to the next step, which is actually testing the solution.
So what if instead I could solve that
Two and a half minutes later.
Well, that's interesting. But you kind of left out a couple of things that would actually make this a lot more valuable to me in solving my pain points.
I see. So you also need features A and B. Why is that?
So this is a big idea. Notice Kevin's now talking about a possible solution, but he hasn't demoed it yet. He's held himself back from bringing out that PowerPoint or wireframe or app, and in not doing so, he's actually learning a lot. He allowed the customer to say, hey Kevin, your description is great, but you're really missing some things that I really need that Kevin didn't quite hear the first time. If he would have jumped right into the demo, the customer would have felt like he had to say yes, great, or something else. But in a dialogue, you're still extracting more information about customer needs.
Wow, this is extremely fascinating. You're teaching me so much. Would you mind if I showed you some ideas that we're working on?
You have a presentation?
Well, actually, we have a working wireframe that I'd like to show you, and I'd like to discuss what you think.
30 minutes later.
Well, Kevin, with these changes, it solves the 2 things that I mentioned earlier. This could be a killer app for us.
Steve, this whole customer discovery process has been incredible. I've been learning a ton, getting out of the building, and the last 30 days has opened my eyes to so much.
That's great.
And I really think that now I'm ready and I've learned enough to go out and raise some money.
So how many customers did you talk to in the last month, Kevin?
7.
7 a day?
No, 7 total.
So, Kevin, I hate to tell you, I know you've been working hard or think you've been working hard, but you're just going through the motions of customer discovery. Customer discovery is about collecting a bunch of customer data so you can make decisions, not only based on the data, but extracting insight out of that data. You're building a mobile app, and there's no way talking to 7 people allows you to understand the customer problem, the customer archetype, how they spend their day, etc. You just have random data points. You really need to be talking to 10 to 15 customers a week, either via Skype or in person. And by the way, SurveyMonkey and online stuff doesn't cut it here. So you need to decide whether you're serious about this process or you just want to use the words.
Okay. Steve, this whole customer discovery process has been incredible. We've been getting out of the building, learning a ton. We talked to 48 customers in this past month.
Wow.
And we think that we've learned a lot.
So what did you learn?
Well, when we talked to customers, they told us 67% said they wanted feature X, 32% wanted feature Y, but only about 7% wanted feature Z.
Great. But what did you learn?
What do you mean, what did we learn? They told us exactly what they wanted and in what order.
But Kevin, do you understand who they are, what their problems are, how they're solving the problem today, what their alternatives are, what they pay for, whether this is valuable?
But they told us exactly what they wanted.
So, Kevin, you really haven't done customer discovery. What you've done is just done an accounting focus group problem. And that's not what discovery is. Discovery is truly understanding how customers spend their day. By the time you're done with discovery, you want to be able to go to that whiteboard and draw the day in the life of the customer. What they do from the minute they get up in the morning, what newspaper or blog they're reading, what car they're driving, what software they're using at work, what do they do to entertain themselves, who do they work for, who else is in their family. If you don't understand that and all you're going for is the features, you're simply trying to solve an accounting problem. Accountants don't run startups. You need to be the customer. You need to get back out there and do that.
Okay.
And that means it's not done by SurveyMonkey. Mm-hmm. It's done either by video Skype or in-person interviews. Because I want to know, am I looking at my watch? Am I distracted over here? Am I reading my email or whatever? You can't tell that in a SurveyMonkey and whatever. Now I'm about to talk about Stanford graduate students, right? trying to price a mobile app. You know, Professor Blank, we spoke to 50 people on our pricing week. Great. Well, what did you decide? $9.99 is the price. What a surprise. Okay, $9.99, you know, that took a bunch of genius, right? And you got into Stanford, that's great. So why did you conclude that? Well, 47 out of 50 said $9.99 was the right price. Great. What did the other 3 say? Oh, that's so silly, you know. And I'm looking at their data because we make them use a tool to automate this process called Launchpad Central. And I look at their data and I said, I want you to stand up in front of the entire class and tell them what the other 3 people you discarded said. And they said, oh, well, it was obvious. These people were crazy. Well, tell the class what they said. They said, well, we paid tens of thousands of dollars for this product. And we added these 3 new features. Why don't you tell the class why you discarded the data? Well, that would take us another 4 months. And so then I said, you know, did you ask those 3 people if they had any more friends? Well, no, we never did. And so this is a common customer discovery mistake, is thinking that A, it's maybe a focus group, or that you're looking for the sum of the data. This is a big idea. Mm-hmm. You're not looking for the data. You're looking for the insight in the data. Any fool could gather data. So I was looking for, is there something like I've just been ignoring?